Hello and welcome back to another episode of ForgeTalks. In case you hadn't noticed, here at ForgeRock, we're pretty enthusiastic about how digital identity can help organizations the world around. And this certainly doesn't exclude public sector organizations. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Tommy Cathey, who is Regional Vice President for the public sector. Tommy, welcome to ForgeTalks. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Fraser. Glad to be here.
So before we get started, I wonder if you would just define for us what we mean at ForgeRock when we say public sector.
No, yeah, very good question. As we look at the ForgeRock go-to-market strategy, we verticalize in two segments. We do healthcare, and we also verticalize in public sector. So we define public sector in the Americas is all the federal government agencies, so Department of Defense, U.S. Army, Navy, Air Force, as well as the civilian agencies. And then we also look at the state and local market, so all our states, and then the local markets would be cities and counties. We also cover higher education, and then we also cover provinces in Canada as well. So that's how we define public sector here at ForgeRock.
And so for those public sector organizations that you described, and kind of, I would say for public sector organizations and governments all across the world, how can identity help?
So as we look at identity in the market landscape within public sector, there's been a big focus in the market around CIAM. And so that is basically around consumer-based identity and access management. Forrester Wave has a report called CIAM. And then we look at that market, and then we dovetail into the public sector market from replacing consumer-based with citizen-based identity and access management. So a lot of organizations within public sector, they provide services to constituents. So we call that citizen-based identity and access management. So ForgeRock is positioned very well, and we have quite a few public sector agencies and customers that provide services to their citizens using the ForgeRock platform.
Okay, great. I guess just to follow on from that, with people, citizens, being used to great digital experiences with the companies they interact with as consumers, they're expecting a better quality of digital experience from the government bodies that they interact with, right?
Absolutely. And as you look at the way that we do digital experiences today, it's no different in the government sector. Most of all authentications and most activity for those services are on a mobile device. We are moving away from that traditional desktop and laptop. So as a citizen, if I need to get my driver's license renewed or I need to register a vehicle, I can do that within certain states, as well as we look at a lot of social services. So Medicaid, Medicare, SNAP, TANF, some of the services that the states and the federal government offers, people need to authenticate to look at that. Another aspect within the pandemic that we're looking at is around unemployment insurance. So there has been an increase in unemployment insurance access. And so ForgeRock works with several states to make sure that those users can access and authenticate properly to get those services.
Right. Great. Well, thank you. And so with US public sector, ForgeRock had some pretty exciting news just this week. Did you want to share with the audience what that was?
Yes. And so as we look at kind of the federal market in public sector, they're on a calendar or fiscal year that ends in September. And so now that we've started a new fiscal year for the federal government, we have announced that a couple of our new SKUs are available on the GSA schedule. And so the GSA schedule is our contract for our public sector entities to purchase from. We partner with a company called Carahsoft. Carahsoft holds our GSA schedule, and then we basically have the ability to modify that schedule with new SKUs and new products. And so that's what we announced this week is having those the latest and greatest solutions on that new GSA schedule.
Great. And it was identity governance and autonomous ID, right?
That is correct. Identity governance and administration, as well as the autonomous ID product.
Brilliant. And for the viewers, we have tons of information on both of those things, but perhaps you could just give us a very quick overview of those two SKUs, as you put it.
Yep. As we look at from a standpoint of the SIAM market, and the other piece of that is around identity management and specifically identity governance and administration. So if you look at the government agencies, a lot of them use manual processes and scripts to manage their user life cycles. So with ForgeRock's identity governance and administration solution, we provide a centralized stack that allows people to set policies on access, risk, and more importantly, segregation of duties. So that is a big issue within the public sector market. Probably one of the biggest challenges in that market is from an auditing perspective. People want to know who gave access to Frazier? How did Frazier get that access? When did he get that access?
Good question.
And so we basically take a piece of that and we call it access review. And that allows auditors to be able to look at users within the solution and what entitlements they have. Auto ID, it's our latest and greatest product. It's really around autonomous identity. We look at artificial intelligence as we look at analytics, really in real time and continuous monitoring of those users' access and the visibility of those entitlements. So think of it this: when you log into your laptop every day, how many entitlements do you have? How many browsers do you have open? How many applications do you have? Multiply that times 10 in the federal government. They have tons and tons of entitlements, decades old entitlements and access, which provides a security risk to that agency. So with autonomous ID, we can look at those entitlements, not only look at them, but we can make real-time remediation on those entitlements to say, does that user need to have access to that in a large-scale environment? The one thing that we're really excited about autonomous identity, as well as our identity governance solution, is the ability to deploy that in the data center of your choice. So we really focus on the DevSecOps, and that allows the federal government and states as well to deploy these products in the data center of their choice, whether it's general compute or on-prem. We're highly flexible, and that's why we're pretty excited about offering this on the GSA.
Yeah, great. And you touched on some of what these solutions can do. It feels like they solve really important problems within public sector bodies.
Absolutely. The number one thing is we look at is access. Everybody wants access, and so that's why we focus on SIAM. But then behind the scenes, we have to be able to have a solution that allows agencies to say who has access, why do they have access, do they need access. Think of it as when you leave an organization, is that user's access revoked? Are we deprovisioning that user? So a lot of times people want access, but they really forget about when that user leaves the organization, what happens to that access? We need to revoke that. And so that's the lifecycle management of the user and all the auditing and the reporting and the things that go with it behind the scenes that typically users don't see.
Yeah, and as well, I think that public sector bodies, they're almost more scrutinized than consumer companies, right? They're held to such a high standard. So it's really important to be able to enable them to do those things.
Not only, absolutely, not only the cyber attacks and the things that we see that they have to deal with, but really on behind the scenes is the auditing and making sure that they do due diligence on that particular user lifecycle management because they have enormous amount of people. We have millions and millions of users in the PubSec platform that need access to applications. So it's an enormous scale to provide that access.
Well, thank you so much, Tommy, for walking us through that. And it's exciting development for ForgeRock and for public sector organizations in the US. If you want to learn any more about this, then there's links on screen now, and you can obviously get in touch with us, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. But for now, Tommy, I'll just say thank you so much for joining me.
Awesome, Frazier. Appreciate the time today.
No worries. And we'll see you next time.